Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at RIA taking a look at a Norinco 84S. This may sort of appear to be a totally bog standard AK, but it's not quite, and I think there's an interesting story behind it. So this was manufactured by Norinco, or rather it was imported by Norinco. It was sold into the US by Norinco. Norinco, which is the North China Industrial Group, I don't remember the exact acronym, and it doesn't exactly fit the word Norinco. But this is a conglomerate of 150 plus different factories in China manufacturing a variety of defense type material. So they do everything from small arms like the Kalashnikov up to tanks and artillery and all sorts of security related stuff. They combine all of these factories together as sort of a conglomerate under the single name Norinco to simplify import-export and sales. So, in the 1980s, Norinco was selling semi-auto AKs into the US market, where they were pretty popular. There was, of course, a stereotype that anything out of China was junk, but the reality of the fact is that Norinco AKs are really quite exceptionally well-made firearms. Now, the gun that they were importing early on, originally, and this started in the early 1980s, was the Type 56S. Type 56 was the Chinese designation for the AK, and the S suffix indicates that it was the semi-auto version for civilian sales. There were a bunch of different versions, and the Type 56 was really a pretty popular product, and it was selling pretty well. And it led Norinco to say, well, boy, if they like those, what else can we sell them? And they thought, well, hey, the Americans like 5.56. Let's see if we can just make one of these in 5.56. Now, they didn't actually have the technical data package for the AK-74, but hey, how hard could it be? They had reverse engineered the AKM. They could make this work in 5.56, and in fact, they did. This is a rifle that Norinco produced commercially, but as of when they were selling them into the US, they'd never actually sold them as a full auto military rifle, or they'd never gotten a contract for it. There were lots of countries that had purchased Type 56 AKs. Now, these have shown up in military use internationally since, but at the time that these were being brought into the US, which was the late 1980s, approximately some people say 85, I think it was more like 88 when these started coming into the US. At that time, this was a civilian-only rifle. There was no military version of it. So let's take a closer look and let me show you a few of the distinctive features of Norinco and really Chinese AKs, because the Chinese also didn't adopt the AKM at this point. The Soviet Union was generally quite willing to help out what it saw as fellow socialist countries with production and manufacture of AK rifles. And to this end, they transferred the technical data package for the original AK, the milled rifle, to China in 1956. And this became the basis for the Type 56 rifle. However, the Chinese and the Soviet Union had a falling out and split shortly after that happened, and as a result, China never got the official technical data package for the AKM. Now, they did in fact reverse engineer the AKM, and this is a good example, albeit in 5.45 millimeter. But what that leads to is a number of little differences between the Chinese version of the AKM and the sort of official Russian and international version. So, if we take a look at a few of those features, the front sight here is fully hooded. That was an AK thing that the Chinese carried over into their stamped receiver guns. I will point out here that on the Type 84 specifically, they replaced the slant brake with an actual sort of birdcage flash hider. Because this is a pre-band gun, this is not welded in place. You can push this. Doesn't want to go all the way in. You can push this pin in and unthread this if you wanted to replace it with something else. We have the gas vents on the gas tube right here, where on the official AKM, those vents were moved to be on the gas block itself. So that's changed. We have a kind of a distinctive sling swivel here as a wire component also built into the gas block. And I will point out here again on the 84S, because this is a pre-ban rifle, this has a functional bayonet lug on it. It is a little interesting that the rear sight is only graduated out to 800. The 545 is a flatter shooting cartridge, and in general, the AKM moved from the original 800-meter rear sight out to a 1,000-meter rear sight, but not so much here, where they kept the early style. The receiver dust cover here is smooth. Another change that the AKM made was to put, basically to lighten the sheet metal for this and give it some reinforcing ribs in the stamping. And again, the Chinese didn't do that. They stuck with a smooth style of top cover held over from the original AK. AKMs also typically have some stamped reinforcing around the pinholes in the shape of some X's typically. We also have a very typical Chinese wooden pistol grip here. That shape is distinctive once you recognize Chinese rifles versus others. Now, if we take a look at the markings here, this is manufactured by factory number 66. That goes all the way back to the Chinese arsenal system set up in the 1920s, which is a subject for a whole different video. Model number is 84S. There's our serial number. This is 556 by 45 millimeter, made in China by Norinco. And then this is the importer out of, I don't remember who exactly CSI is, but out of Los Angeles, California at the time. Now, there are actually 6 different versions of this rifle. The 84S here is the standard one, which, as you see, it's just a wood fixed stock and wood furniture. There was also the 84S-1, which was a wood handguard and an underfolding stock. The -2 was a wood handguard and a side-folding stock. The -3 was polymer fixed stock and handguard, and that was specifically an extra long buttstock instead of the standard model or the standard size that the wooden ones use. The -4 was a polymer handguard side folder, and the -5 was a polymer handguard and side folder that was black. So no mechanical differences between any of these, but you had a variety of different furniture options. And of course, because all of the 84S variants are rare, any individual one is rare by itself. There isn't a universal 545 AK magazine pattern or a standard the way there is with 7.62. There are a variety of countries that have used 5.56 caliber AKs. The Galil, the commercial Valmet rifles were available in 5.56, as well as the Norinco 84, and they pretty much all have their own proprietary magazines. This is no exception. So 84S magazines have the same body stamping pattern as typical Chinese 7.62 caliber, 7.62 millimeter magazines, the same sort of smooth back to them, but these are not interchangeable directly with any of the other pattern magazines. If we go ahead and do a little disassembly here, we can pull out the bolt. You may notice that we have a 5.56 bolt face there, but this has the large diameter bolt stem of a 7.62 millimeter AK. Now, when the Russians made the AK-74, they changed up some of this and they reduced the diameter of this bolt stem. AK-74 bolts are kind of distinctive that way. Well, Norinco didn't have the AK-74 technical data package, and what they were doing was simply taking their existing Type 56 and converting it to 5.56. So that's how they did it. There is a spring-loaded firing pin in this, so that's a nice safety feature that's worth mentioning there. And of course, the bolt carrier and bolt are left in the white, nice and shiny. These have turned into pretty collectible rifles today because they were only imported for just a couple of years. The assault weapons import ban in 1989 cut off access to them, and anything that followed had a bunch of changed features. So this still has the threaded muzzle, it still has the bayonet lug, and it is really an iconic version of kind of this interesting hybrid Chinese AK/AKM/AK-74. It's a neat rifle. They're very well built, and they're very popular among collectors of the AK as well as shooters. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you learned something about this particular pattern. Thanks for watching.